The next principle is dialogue. It kind of stands at the heart of what we mean by a partnership approach, because if I see you as an equal, as I see you as an autonomous person, if I want to hear what you have to say, I think your voice is important, and we go back and forth, hearing each other, treating each other as equals, recognizing our own capacity to control our lives. We probably see each other in a conversation that looks a lot like a dialogue. And I first learned about dialogue back in this book, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And we'll come back to this book because I think it's really important. But Freire says the only way we can truly engage in a mutually humanizing conversation is where both of our voices are heard, where we have a dialogue, a back and forth flow of conversation. When I worked with Michael Fullen and he had me read Peter Senge's Fifth Discipline, I saw dialogue again pop up as one of the 5 disciplines, and started to think about what dialogue might look like. And in reading Senge's book, I was pointed towards David Bohm's little book called On Dialogue. The actual book itself is only a few pages long. Now there's some newer versions with second chapters and introductions to make it look like a bigger book, but the initial one is just a transcription of a conversation. And in the book, Bohm, this is a really seminal and important book too, I must say. I think it's shaped a lot of what Senge has to say, and everything that people have said about dialogue since this book is probably, to some extent, colored by what Bohm has to say. And he defines dialogue by looking at the etymology of the word, dia, logos. Logos is meaning, dia, flowing back and forth. And so a dialogue is a conversation where meaning flows back and forth. At the same time I was reading these books, my concept of dialogue grew as I came to the University of Kansas and I studied a course on the philosophy of science. I read this book by R.J. Bernstein called Beyond Objectivism and Relativism. And what Bernstein says, amongst many other things, is that when we have two people grounded in two different paradigms, the way forward is through dialogue. If you see science through one paradigm and I see science through another paradigm, he says there's a danger of what he calls incommensurability. That is, we can't talk to each other because we're grounded in a whole different set of beliefs. You might see some connections between our current political system and how hard it is to have conversations because people are grounded in two different paradigms. Maybe not, but that's, in my mind, that's what I see. And what Bernstein says is the way out of a world where people can't talk because they're living in two different paradigms is through dialogue, a back and forth flow of conversation where people think together, where they listen to each other, where they embrace the capacity to engage in a conversation grounded in listening and learning, not about being right, but about doing right. And there's another number of other books on dialogue. I like William Isaac's book, Dialogue, is a great one. As you can see, packed with material that shaped my thinking. And then Daniel Yankeliewicz's book, The Magic of Dialogue, is another one. If you wanted just 2 books on dialogue, I would probably say Bohm's On Dialogue and Dialogue by William Isaacs. My favorite book about dialogue is probably Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Actually, not probably. I know without a shadow of a doubt this is the book that's got me thinking the most about dialogue. I come back to these ideas frequently. And Freire says there are 5 conditions for dialogue. The first one is humility. If I just want to prove that you're wrong and win the argument, we're not really going to ever have a dialogue. A dialogue is a back and forth, and I have to be open to hearing what you have to say, and then I suppose you have to be open to hearing me. So without humility, I don't think dialogue is really possible. The second condition is hope. We can't have a dialogue if we're just moaning and complaining about life. A dialogue is a conversation about a better possible future. And so when we engage in dialogue, we're talking about how we can make things better, how we can move forward, how we can do things. The third condition is faith. That sounds funny, I suppose. What does that mean? Well, what it means is, for Freire, that we have faith that we can learn from the other person. Now, he grew up in Brazil. In 1929, his family was thrown into poverty. When he went back to school, he was placed 3 grade levels behind his peers. He went on to teach at Harvard. His book sold 1 million copies. He was education minister for his country. But he never forgot what it was like to be in poverty. And he dedicated a lot of his life to helping people who were poor and illiterate learn language, develop literacy skills. And what Freire said is, I can't teach them unless I believe they have something to teach me. That's the idea of faith. So a principal, for example, or an instructional coach might say, what's that new teacher got to teach me? Well, the condition of faith is, I have to go into the conversation as a learner, not a judger, if I want to have a dialogue. Dialogue assumes that person can teach me something. And then in our conversation, we embrace the fourth condition, which is critical thinking. We explore things together. A dialogue is a meeting of the minds, a thinking partnership. It's where we share ideas and we analyze things and we critically think things through, looking at them, again, not to be right, but to do what's right. And the last condition is love. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. What the heck does that mean? What is the context for that word in professional development? And I don't know if this is Paulo Freire or if this is me, because I've thought about this so much, but what I've come to believe is love is, I have an attitude of benevolence towards the other person. I want what's best for them. And when you have two people who look at each other with benevolence, when they genuinely want what's best for the other person, then the condition for dialogue presents itself, and then dialogue can happen.